Welcome to the How HR Leaders Change the World podcast. I'm your host, Cecilia Crossley, and each week we explore how the work of HR leaders is also creating positive social change, contributing to the UN Sustainable Development Goals, goals which the world's companies are increasingly understanding the urgency of achieving and investing in the action required. If you'd like clear, actionable ideas for how you can use the power of your role to affect change in your company, you're in the right place. Following a corporate upbringing, I founded the social enterprise From Babies with Love. We provide services to HR leaders, and through this work, I realised that HR professionals and social entrepreneurs are working in the same areas, albeit in different ways. So we created this podcast to share knowledge on steps we can take through the work of HR. In my opinion, if you're an HR professional, you are also a change maker. And this podcast will provide you with examples of how. By sharing the successes of some of the world's most inspiring HR leaders, you can frame your work in the context of positive change, implement brilliant ideas, and feel absolutely wonderful about doing so. Welcome, Sarah Morris, to How HR Leaders Change the World. I'm delighted to have you here and would love you to introduce yourself.
Oh, it's really lovely to be here, Cecilia. And I have to say, the title of the podcast, I feel a bit intimidated by, because I'm not sure we change the world, but certainly I feel we're in a position of great responsibility and a job that I absolutely love. So I'm Sarah. I've been at Compass Group for about coming up to a year now, unbelievably. I joined during the pandemic, during lockdown, which has been an incredibly interesting experience. We are a food service business in 46 countries around the world. So the way we like to describe ourselves is we feed people in all kinds of different environments the most incredible food in the most incredible way. And so that covers everything from schools in the UK, schools in the US. We do a lot in businesses and offices that you would have known, and maybe some of our listeners will have eaten our food in those environments. We do a lot of sporting events, so Wimbledon, football clubs, racing, golf. And we do some interesting things like defence and offshore, so oil rigs, the British Armed Forces when they're deployed around the world. So really do cover lots of different aspects. Got about 500,000 colleagues around the world who do the most incredible job every single day and have continued to do so through the pandemic.
Brilliant, thank you. And it's very, lovely the way you say about the title of the podcast. I definitely believe that if you're an HR professional, you impact people and therefore you impact society. And I think that's true no matter the size of the company that you work for, big or small. But I thought, how interesting to think about. You mentioned the size of Compass Group's workforce globally. And I thought, I'm just going to look up and see how many countries there are with smaller populations than Compass Group, because I thought, what great context for actually the scale of impact that you create in your work. And I actually didn't realise it was as many as 500,000 now. So I think this statistic is wrong, but I'm going to say it's at least more than 25 countries. So, I mean, isn't that how can you not impact the world?
Yeah, no, it's incredible. And I'm always acutely aware of the number of lives we can impact. And I think that's a really important part of the role is we are a people business. After all, there's no such thing as great food without great people. And therefore, we really do impact the lives of a significant number of people and a significant number of customers, of course.
Yes, absolutely. So with that, let's dive into the 5 questions that we ask our HR leaders. The first of which is, as an HR leader whose influence creates social change, what do you feel has been your most impactful action to date?
About 3 years ago now, I was in a previous organisation at Aviva and in my old role as Chief People Officer there. And we were doing a lot of work in the gender diversity space, which is an area I'm sure we'll talk more about. I'm incredibly passionate about and I've worked in for a number of years. And we'd started to think about what we could do to support working parents. There was a lot of conversations that I was hearing in different countries about the challenges for men and women actually as parents. And we had an idea, the then Chief Executive and I, and we thought, wouldn't it be great if we could take away some of the barriers and really try and level the playing field? And that to this day has been my mantra in this particular space. How do you level the playing field for parental leave? How do you enable both men and women to have a choice to take time off when a new baby arrives, however that baby might arrive, and spend it with them if they wish to, and that the choice not be limited by somebody's financial concerns? What we know to be true in many, many places around the world is that the reality is it is limited by financial concerns because paternity pay is usually unpaid. If it's paid for a very limited, maybe 5 days, maybe 10, but often not even that. And therefore, it often is a financial decision for people as to whom has to take the time out and spend time at home. And so we decided to equalise parental leave everywhere around the world for that business. I feel incredibly proud of the fact that we did it. I think the take-up has improved year on year. But more importantly for me, although we started it there, what I really hoped for was that we'd start a bit of a movement. And I'm just so delighted to see every month it feels like there's another organisation who announces that they're levelling the playing field for parental leave, or that they've increased provisions in some way. And I feel very hopeful that we have started a bit of change in that space, and that we've started to even increase the conversations around the challenges of both parents being able to take time out at that very important time. So I feel like it's made a real impact, and I guess I'm incredibly proud of the team that did it with me, and the fact that it's continued to live on in other organisations beyond that.
Yeah, my LinkedIn feed is full of companies following your lead and thinking more progressively and taking steps, some more incremental than the bold ones you took at Aviva. But your comments about starting a movement, just from my layperson's perspective on the other side of a screen, I can see it happening, and it's incredible. I'm a parent myself, and I've experienced some of the challenges you described, and I think so many of our listeners will relate to that too, and want to see more of the change that you have in your vision.
You make a really important point though about a step and a movement, because whenever I get asked, and I'm absolutely happy to talk to organisations that are interested in exploring it as to how they can move in the direction, because it's really important that people realise this is not one size fits all. Not all organisations have the financial means to support doing this in exactly the same way. And I think it's important for those of us who are involved in leading this work to be thoughtful about that. And my encouragement is just take a step. If you can take a step in the direction of equalising the playing field, levelling the playing field for both men and women, then you're doing something better than you were doing last week as an organisation. And however small that step might seem, it is valued by the people who benefit from it.
Yeah. And if you were working in a company and you had a situation of I'm sorry, there is no budget, but you wanted to take a step, a small step, what would be your first choice of what you would recommend that small step could be?
Yeah, I think there's some really creative ways of thinking about this, because I do think that's a reality, especially following the pandemic. Organisational performance for many businesses has been really challenging. So I think there are some interesting things you can do around leave exchange, around parental leave exchange. I've seen organisations who have offered that where they've got the ability to do it. I've also seen some very interesting business cases put around this, because what we know is that the cost of losing those women in certain markets, particularly who choose to opt out because they fundamentally feel it's too difficult to try and do both things well, the business case is pretty compelling. So I think the kind of there's no budget is very disheartening, and my advice is not to give up, but equally not to just keep going and saying the same things. Of course, there's nothing more frustrating than someone saying, but we must just do it. We must just do it. It doesn't really land very well. It's got to be a much more reasoned and thought through argument with a business case behind it. Some of this business case is hard because there isn't, if somebody said to me, tell me the kind of payback, if you like, on equalising parental leave, I could give you a load of answers to that. But what I can't give you is a hard dollar number or pound note number in many circumstances. There's just something much more systemic to it than that.
Yeah, I really, it's making me smile to hear you describe that challenge, because in our work at From Babies with Love, we have qualitative evidence coming out of our ears, and we have long-term change that is publicly available evidence. But the quantitative, what's the impact tomorrow? What's my ROI tomorrow? I can't do. And by training, I'm an accountant, and I cannot square this circle, and I've had to come to terms with that. And it kind of makes me laugh at myself and my own approach and how I've had to shift that thinking, so brilliant. Thank you, Sarah. That was fascinating. So may I lead us on to question 2, which is thinking about your industry. So the food service provision work of Compass Group and related industries to that. What do you think is the most exciting opportunity for HR to change the world?
I think we have a moment in time to make a very significant difference for social equality. We are an organisation and an industry in many cases that is barrierless to entry. What do I mean by that? You can join Compass, having not succeeded at school in the way that maybe some of your friends did, having had a really challenging time at university, for whatever reason that might be, and you can have a really successful long career here. We have many, many examples of people who have joined us as an apprentice or an equivalent program and gone on to be an executive chef of an incredible restaurant somewhere in the world, gone on to be the executive chef of an oil platform somewhere in Australia. We've got great examples of that through and through the business. We really are an apprentice business where you learn the trade, where you learn how to do this job from being in it, which is brilliant. And so if you think about that in a wider societal context, where we know that the gap is widening in education, we know the gap in social equality is widening and has continued to do through the pandemic, I think we can make a big difference in this. I think if we can get it right and we can continue to attract and employ people, particularly young people, those people who come from a disadvantaged background, from social equality hotspots, and bring them into our organisation and provide the training, provide the longevity and the career progression, we really believe this could change society. I think what's helpful is that we are at a point in time where societies in many markets are revaluing the way they think about frontline jobs. So we employ wonderful cooks, wonderful cleaners. We employ wonderful people all around the world doing frontline jobs, many porters, many cleaners and cooks in hospitals, for example, right through the pandemic. And where previously those careers might not have been thought of as something that people would aspire to, I think that's changing. And it's really important we keep hold of that. If we then couple that with being able to add barrierless entry, imagine the change we could make in society if we could really start to do it. So we've got a bunch of things planned. We're opening an academy in a part of England which we know has significance for social equality because we believe that will make a big difference. I think the industry is perfectly placed to really make a difference in that space.
How HR Leaders Change the World is brought to you by From Babies with Love, and this episode is sponsored by our very own parental leave gift service. We help solve the challenge of connecting with colleagues across parental leave and in returning to work, contributing to talent retention and so too gender balance strategy. From Babies with Love donates 100% of its profits to orphaned and abandoned children. Your beautiful, sustainably sourced From Babies with Love gifts come with the story of how your company is also helping a less fortunate child, creating meaningful engagement. We transform spend that so often already takes place on flowers or products that don't have the Sustainable Development Goals at their heart. We transform that spend to become a consistent, inclusive and strategic part of your working parents programme. Ask us to tell you more at frombabieswithlove.org. Make an impact at a defining moment. And are you an advocate of the apprenticeship model? You mentioned that there is something that you operate. Would you advocate that businesses that don't have apprenticeship models try to incorporate those to access different groups of talent?
I think it's really important we distinguish between the apprenticeship model as a way of attracting talent, training talent and providing career progression versus the government apprenticeship policy, for which we do think there are some opportunities to make that better. For example, in the way in which the money is spent on certain training, the periods of time, we think there is improvement opportunity there. But let's, for the moment, suspend that because that's also only in one market and think about the apprenticeship model. We think it's a great way forward because it really does bring people in at the point at which they want to learn. They've got the opportunity. We're a business, again, which can offer different career opportunities, different tracks. Being a chef is very multi-talented, so there's a lot of different environments you can do that in. But there's also a lot of other jobs and roles within our industry and sectors within our industry. So as an apprentice, I think it really is a good model. I think other businesses, it is quite particular to other businesses. I recognise that. I don't think it works as well for everybody, but there are lots and lots of businesses where it does work really well.
Brilliant. Thank you. And question 3 is our next question, which is, which particular area of social or environmental injustice are you personally passionate about, and see that your role at Compass Group gives you the chance to create change in that area?
Do you know, I find it really hard to pick one. And I sometimes worry that by doing work and being passionate about one particular angle implies that in some way I think it's more or less important, and that never is the case. But actually, when I just stand back for a minute and hear you ask that question, every single time I come back to the gender inequality in society, I find it infuriating. I find it extraordinary, some of the examples I still come across in this day and age, in this modern environment that we all work and live in. And also, I believe I fundamentally can help to shift that. We've talked about parental leave already, but I think there's lots of things we can all do. And I have to believe that it provides a better platform for business, a better platform for the world around us. So I think that is, if I had to pick one, that's the one where I do an awful lot of work. I'm most active, but certainly there's so many others you could spend your time on right now.
Absolutely, yes, I feel the same way. And in addition to the leadership role you've had in the space of parental leave equality, are there any other? And just thinking also, parental leave is such a key driver of impacting gender balance, particularly at senior levels. Are there any other key areas of your work in the space of gender equality that you are focusing on to affect change?
Yeah, I think two other areas at the moment. One is the living wage, which again started as a bit of a US concept, but there are equivalents of the living wage, the real living wage, in many other countries, and we're just looking at that right now. I think when you have a workforce or an industry where the predominance gender balance is women, if you're not paying that, then of course you're inadvertently affecting a greater proportion of the female workforce. I think that's one area where, if we can do it as an organisation that operates at the scale and operating environments that we do, then I really do encourage other organisations to have a look at that, because I think it's one of those small steps you can take that for our frontline workforce makes a huge difference. And financially, of course, there's a cost to it. As you say, you're an accountant yourself. We all understand the financials of running our businesses, but it is, if you believe in making a change, I think from a gender perspective, there's lots of other benefits to it, but I think from a gender perspective, it does in certain industries disproportionately affect women more than men. And then the other thing that we spend a lot of time on, and I personally spend a lot of time on, is the mentoring, coaching and development of female talent. Now, for anyone jumps up and down and says, don't fix the women, it's not the women's fault, I completely agree. You won't find anyone who agrees more than that. I think it's for everybody to fix. I think men and women have got lots to do. I think the system needs looking at. There's some systemic issues. But there are also lots of women who really appreciate coaching, mentoring and development in the same way men do, but for whatever reason, they don't put themselves forward, they don't find they've got access to it. So we do a lot of work in that space. I do a lot of work and mentoring in that space. I've been fortunate myself to be the benefit of it. And so I feel strongly that it's my opportunity to give that back.
Yeah. And our conversation around gender equality leads us really nicely into the next question 4, which is about how you use your position at work to bring about a more equitable and inclusive environment in a way that delivers your business goals. And so just to flow on from the conversation we were having under question 3, I think because when you're at your board meetings, it would be fascinating just to hone in this topic on perhaps an example you might have had of a challenge in a conversation on a board around how will this contribute to our business goals, if I think about purely commercial, financial, reporting to the markets type business goals, and perhaps an example of where you've, in that conversation, been able to overcome any challenge that's been presented by other board members in order to drive the agenda, the equity and inclusion agenda in the company.
It's interesting because it's really hot on my mind right now, because I am just in the process. We actually had a session yesterday as an executive team on inclusive leadership with the most amazing organisation, and I think most of us came away feeling we'd learned more about what it meant to truly be inclusive than we ever had in 20 years previously. So I've been doing a lot of thinking around, if you take a boardroom, let's say the average board or executive team is 10 to 12 people, you've got to imagine when you walk into that environment, you've got all different ranges of perspectives in that room. Some will be convinced, some will be unconvinced, some will be what I call kind of active, passive, actively sort of unconvinced, others are passive about it. How do you make sure that you address everybody's concerns and preferences about the agenda? And so I've been doing a lot of this recently. And I think the honest answer has to be, you have to come at it from a number of angles. So for us, that means we come at it from 4 different angles. We come at it from the societal angle. So why is this, whatever this is, let's imagine it's a change in a policy or an implementation of something. Why is it the right thing to do from a society perspective? What change will it give us? We've talked about being barriers to entry. What is that? What are our shareholders and stakeholders saying? So it's very easy now to understand what investors around us are saying. we've got lots and lots of, all of us have got lots of access to that. So why are shareholders demanding that we pay attention in this space? What are our customers and clients saying? And for us, our customers and clients demand that we pay sufficient attention to inclusion and diversity in a very significant way. And we've got lots of our customers who are willing to tell us that. And then colleagues, what are our colleagues saying about this? Why do our colleagues feel it's so important? What are the benefits to them, both the quantitative and the qualitative ones? And I think if you can do a good job of putting together those 4 perspectives on the policy, the implementation, the program, the change, there's something for everybody. Now, it's not so easy as maybe a piece of M&A. Let's go and take a look at this business we might be interested in buying. Here's the business case, here's the payback, all the metrics we're accustomed to looking at. But I do think the vast majority of businesses, boards and executive teams have moved on to a place where if you can address those 4 angles, then you've got a good chance of at least getting them to let you to start. And in many cases, if you really get pushback, my encouragement is always to say to them, let me start it, let me try this. And my commitment is to you, if in 3 months, 6 months, whatever, it's not working, then we'll have another conversation.
That's such a helpful framework for any of our listeners who are wanting to do this work, and the structure of how you've broken that down will, I'm sure, be so helpful in where to start and giving it a go. And the trial approach, the pilot approach, is always makes it seem like less of a big thing from anyone's perspective, doesn't it? So thank you very much for that. So our final question, we really love to get to specific, because we really love for anybody listening to have, if they're thinking, I love what Sarah said, I want to go and start and put that on my to-do list tomorrow. But of course, we've discussed some very big topics. So it's really honing down into just one thing, one practical thing that you would love to see all HR leaders, all HR professionals do to help make a change in the world. What would that one thing be?
Again, I find it so hard to pick. And as somebody who, you and I were chatting earlier, I've got a young family and a demanding role. And I said to you earlier this morning, I'm feeling a bit exhausted right now with everything. I find it hard to kind of then pick which one would make the biggest impact in an organisation. But I do come back to, I'm going to give 2, because I think organisations are so different. And I know we've got listeners from 5 people startups through to 600,000 person organisations. So I'd say one of them would be around parental leave. Whatever markets you're in, take a step. Even if that step is a very small one, take a step to start to level the playing field in that space. And then the second one is around real living wage, or the equivalent in the markets you're in. Because again, I come back to, it's very easy for us to worry about whether we're paying enough in financial services and technology and industries I've been in. But actually, we also need to really think hard about our frontline colleagues who are fundamentally keeping most of our economies running every day, and whether we're doing the right thing there. So if everybody, I'd love everyone to do both, but if everybody just took a step directionally on one of those as a community of professionals, which I'm hugely passionate about, would make a difference.
And as we hopefully find our way out of the pandemic, what a fantastic way, a fantastic thought to leave our discussion today on. Thank you so much, Sarah. That's been absolutely fascinating. And I really appreciate your time and the opportunity to have you here on How HR Leaders Change the World. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Cecilia. I've really, really enjoyed it, and really appreciate all the work that you're doing as well in this space. It's incredibly important.
Thank you. Bye.
Take care.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of How HR Leaders Change the World. Thank you for tuning in. If you have a moment to leave a review, a 5-star one please, that would be a huge help to achieving our goal to reach more of your peers, so we can all contribute to further and faster positive change. For your copy of the show notes, head to frombabieswithlove.org, where you can also join the How HR Leaders Change the World mailing list, and make sure you don't miss out on future episodes and bonus materials. And for harnessing the power of your role to create positive social change, I'm sending you a jumping up in the air virtual high five. See you next time on How HR Leaders Change the World.